Hey people, so for today's assignment, we are using the knife tool to cut up pieces of text. You can use one letter or you can use like two letters like I did over here. And then towards the end of the video, I'll show you just a freehand shaping tool. So I basically just put on text with the text tool and then converted it to a raw path this time. And then you can use the knife tool and cut it up. So let me show you what I'm talking about. You start with a new composition and you put text down with your text tool. So just click the text tool and then click to drag out a text box and pick a letter and a font. So big fat fonts like Ultra or let's see, Wendy might be pretty good. Big, thick fonts will give you big pieces to work with. You can also bold them or put a strike through them just to kind of vary your letters and create a design. So once you have your 4 letters that you want to work with on your composition, you convert them to a path. If we just hit this convert to path button, it'll work, but a lot of times it'll fill in the middles of the letters and give you kind of little problems. So I found that it works better to convert it to a raw path, which is pretty much the same thing. I'm just finding that it works a lot better with text. So anyways, you select the text that you want to convert to a raw path and then go to modify, path, convert to raw path. And it'll remove the fill from it. So you just come over here and put the fill back on. And now we have a raw path. Letter D. So I just enlarged it and it's selected. It has this blue box around it, and that's when you can use the knife tool. So the knife tool is not going to work on something that's not selected, like the Q over there. It's only going to work on the parts that are selected. If you're trying to make like a completely straight perpendicular line or horizontal line, hold down Shift. And then once you see that line, then you can go with the select tool and just click away and then reselect it. You can move with the arrows or you can click and drag it. You can rotate it. It's pretty much up to you just to create an interesting design. Again, whatever's selected and has that blue box around it, then hit the knife tool and then drag, click and drag to make a cut. You can hold down Shift to get it horizontal, vertical, or at a standard angle. So once you see that blue line, then grab the selection tool, and I'm finding that I have to like actually click away from the letter and then click the piece that I want to move. And then keep going with the knife tool. Moving letters. Or moving pieces of letters. So again, create an interesting design with the knife tool by selecting a text or a letter and then going modify, path, convert to raw path. Once it's converted to a raw path, you need to add a fill. So in fills, you just add a fill and make it bigger. And then with it selected, use the knife tool and cut up pieces. And then use the selection tool and move the pieces around. Okay, let's do it with this guy. Just to go over this again, I just selected it and then modify, path, convert to raw path, and then add a fill, resize it, get it nice and big. And then with it selected, hit the knife tool and you can cut pieces. And then with the pointer tool, you can move those pieces. I think you can do multiples too. So now I selected 2 and hit the knife tool, click and drag across the whole thing. Now I have that line, hit the select tool and move it. There you go. So again, move these around to kind of come up with an interesting design. You can get really super teeny tiny like I did right here, or you can make them kind of big and blocky. So you can also, these are editable paths now, so you can do things like this if you select a piece, and then you can go into and sub-select your anchor points like we had been doing. So, whoops, select, and then with the sub-selector tool, you can click and drag, get multiple anchor points, and then move these guys around. And change them up. You can even change the joints and the curves if you want. It looks a little out of place, but you can experiment. Let me show you the freehand shaping tool real quick. So this is your other option, but you still have to go modify path, convert to raw path, and then add a fill. Okay, and then I'm just going to, whoops, select it with the regular selection tool and get it nice and big. Okay, and so underneath the knife tool in here, there's a little caret, and you get the drop down. There's the freehand shaping tool. Freehand shaping tool is basically like cutting out pieces or adding pieces to a path. So this is my path, and I'm just going to cut pieces into this black area. So you start outside of the area. If you want to cut into it, click and drag, and then come back around. It just cuts out a piece. Right. The opposite also works. If you start within the colored part or within the filled part, it'll add to the path. So if I start within, I click and drag out and around. So I'm adding pieces. So you are free to use this. You don't need to if you don't feel that you want to. But it can be kind of fun to play with, the freehand shaping tool. All right. So let me scoot back to here. This is what I did with the freehand shaping tool. I just cut into my cue with these kind of long organic shapes. It's basically it. Let me know if you have any issues. It can be a little tricky to work with text sometimes, so just be patient and try to have fun.